Let's have a look at crypto gaming and let's look at Decentraland, ticker symbol MANA, versus the Sandbox, ticker symbol SAND, the two largest gaming-related cryptocurrencies. Now on this channel, we like to look at various data points, and of course, we are going to look at the different charts, not just in US dollars, but also relative to Ethereum, relative to Bitcoin, and relative to one another. Now, one first very rough gauge is probably the search volume over here on Google Trends. We can see Decentraland had basically two large attention spikes. The Sandbox only had one. The second spike here basically happened at the same time in end of November, beginning of December last year, when this whole Metaverse topic started to really accelerate and gain popularity. And so when analyzing the charts, we obviously want to look at the logarithmic charts, right? So the changes you see over here are just in the cents. The changes over here are in the single digit dollars, right? So when we switch this, right, when we look at a linear scale, where the deltas here are constant, we barely can see what happened in 2019, 2020, simply because MANA has grown so much. And the same is true for Sandbox. Here, look at this. In the early days, you don't see much. And so we want to look at the logarithmic charts. And the reason why we don't just want to focus on the US dollar chart, but why we want to actually look at relative valuation to Ethereum and to Bitcoin. The reason why we do this is because there's simply a lot of correlation within crypto, right? Look at this price top over here in MANA around the end of November of last year. Let's look at Bitcoin during the same time. It also peaked around November. Let's look at the valley over here, middle of July. Here in MANA, we also had a valley. And the same is true here for Sandbox, right? Look at this, also relatively low over here, another low here, middle of June, and a similar depressed price can be seen for MANA. So really, cryptocurrencies, they tend to move in tandem to one another, right? When there's a rally, basically everything is rallying. When there's a depression, everything is losing value. And so the idea of relative valuation is simply to make a decision on what kind of cryptocurrency to buy. In the end, we always need an overall positive environment, right? We always need Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the altcoins in general to go up to also gain here with our gaming cryptocurrencies. But let's say you have this thesis. Let's say you do think that we are currently comparatively cheap in crypto, and you're considering, should I rather buy Decentraland or Sandbox? So you've got crypto gaming on your radar and you want to buy the leaders. What's potentially the better bet right now? And that's why we look at relative valuation. So let's first look at MANA in Ethereum. So note how different those charts are, right? This is the US dollar chart where we've got all of this rally, a bit of a sideways trading range, and then all of this rally. Once we divide this by Ethereum, this looks pretty different, right? Because Ethereum also rallied. Let's also look at the relative chart to Bitcoin. Same story. So of course, we still have these massive jumps over here, right? But we also see there are times where relative performance compared to, for example, Ethereum is not that great, right? This was half a year of price action, and MANA during Q2 and Q3 of last year lost more than 70% versus Ethereum. So I really want to make sure to time this somewhat right, to not necessarily just buy the hype. And so if you do just very basic TA over here, right, we do see quite a few turnarounds here where we had this level as a support. We also had quite a few turnarounds over here. This has been resistance a few times. And now if we zoom into the recent past, we also see there is a resistance pretty close to the price we are currently at. And let's do the same exercise for Sandbox. A very similar picture, right? Which once was a resistance, then became a support. Same is true for this level over here. And now we are in this sidewards trading range. So simply looking at this very short-term, Sandbox might look like a better risk to reward, right? The risk might be around 9%. The reward might be around 35% if we assume we stay in the sidewards trading range. For MANA, this doesn't look as positive, right? We had 4 hits of this resistance over here. And so unless we can't overcome it this time, we are looking at a potential gain of only 5% versus a potential loss of somewhere between 18 to 30%. So just looking at how are the cryptocurrencies currently doing versus the largest of the altcoins versus Ethereum, MANA might be somewhat heated. Sandbox could be a potential buy if you like to trade these sideways trading ranges. Now let's make a direct comparison. So let's look at Mana divided by Sandbox. That's this chart over here. So how is Mana performing over the long term in terms of price development? And this again is a very, very different chart, right? It looks like over the long term, Mana was underperforming Sandbox. Let's just take a middle price over here and maybe see the current trading range, the middle of that trading range as a reference. We are looking at an underperformance of approximately 60% so far. So again, at least long term, Decentraland doesn't look that great. And one might also argue that maybe around this level here, we could have a potential support, right? So this is an outperformance for Mana versus Sandbox of around 24% or so. But I'm not sure if that's really worth it given the long-term underperformance. There's definitely quite a bit of resistance to overcome here. Now, of course, all of this crypto gaming topic, right? It has to be seen in the context of the current disaster at Facebook or at Meta. In case you're not aware, Facebook had a very, very bad day recently. We are looking at a drop from its all-time high of almost 40%. It's the very first time that Facebook monthly active users have been declining. Facebook is betting very heavily on this whole gaming metaverse topic. And so far, those investments are not paying off and investors are not pleased. Now, still, when we zoom out, right, Facebook over the very, very long term, it looks nice, right? It's basically appreciating. There are these bumps in the road that can be painful. They can be 50% or so. We had those several times. And so maybe this is just simply another buying opportunity, right? Buy low, sell high. That's the idea. But here's something I think everybody should do in stocks that's relatively uncommon that we do on this channel very often with crypto. We should look at relative performance, right? Don't just look at the US dollar chart of your cryptocurrency. Look at how your asset is doing in the grand scheme of things. And for that, let's look at the Facebook price divided by the Nasdaq index, by the technology index. And that's what you get. A very, very different chart, right? This looks all rosy. Let's just buy the dip. But once we look at how is Facebook performing relative to the rest of tech, this is not that pretty anymore, right? The all-time high was in July 2017 over here at this point. Since then, Facebook has underperformed. And that's quite a significant underperformance. We are now not looking at US dollar losses. We are looking at losses compared to the average simply, a 44% loss. And so, of course, when times are as depressed as now, there will be people that buy this up and Facebook could easily go up, say, 10%, 20% in the short term. But the question is, do you want to hold this over the long term when it's underperforming the broad, diversified tech index? I have my doubts. I don't think just looking at the TA, just looking at relative movements, that Facebook is a buy, at least in its current shape. But of course, this is no financial advice over here, right? This is stocks. These are regulated financial instruments. So of course, there is a disclaimer to be made over here. If you're wondering if I buy this Facebook dip, I don't. And that's simply because this is not how I think the relative performance in an overall market should look like. This is a long-term chart, right? This chart starts in May 2012. So this is simply just technical analysis, right? If you've got fundamental reasons to get into Facebook or to prefer Mana over Sandbox, of course, by all means, go ahead. This video simply just looks at the charts, and considering the charts, Sandbox does look like the better deal in relative valuations to Decentraland, and we're making similar considerations for Facebook. A simple Nasdaq ETF also looks better than taking on this individual idiosyncratic risk of a Facebook stock. Please give this video a like in case you enjoyed the content. And please feel free to check out the premium membership as well. I publish daily market updates over there. There's quite a bit of exclusive content. And of course, a private chat where you can ask me any questions. If you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe. And last but not least, there's also a public Telegram channel to be found at Bitcoin Strategy Channel. Simply search for that within the Telegram app. See you next time. Bye-bye.